is where people are really starting to branch off from like this is what I was raised believing versus this is what I believe, and like they start asking questions and questioning the world around them in ways that will be really foundational to how they are when they're older. And I think when you're writing adult characters, you just start to stiffen up a little bit in
Hmm.
not in like a rigid, unchangeable, icky way, but like a sapling is very different than an oak tree, right? And so adults are much more set in their ways, in their beliefs, whereas I think young adults have this immense capacity to ask really deep, important questions and go through like massive spans of like metamorphosis in a very condensed time period.
Fitz of Writing. Welcome to the Fitz of Writing. Hey there, Scribbles and Scratches. I am your host, R.M. Johnson. And as always, this is for our creative edification as well as your entertainment. If you guys like what we're doing on the channel, you want to help us, help the authors we bring on, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And if you guys are interested to see what we have going on creatively, check out the other parts of our channel where we're, turning our poems into songs, or creating writing prompts based on just a visual image and seeing what we come up with that way. But we're doing something a little bit different. Normally, I'd have this big spiel where I'm introducing someone, but we had someone kind of drop out at the last minute, and so we put out our feelers to fill a spot. And Abigail Morrison took up the gauntlet and decided to come onto the show, and I thank you for your time. She is a indie author with 2 books out, and I believe they are both young adult, right? Young adult fantasy. Okay,
Yep.
just make sure. Like I said, we're shooting from the hip a little bit today. Um, but the first one is the Yoknee's Eye, and the second one is the first book in what is going to be a series called the Chronicles of Castia. Book 1 is Downfall, right? And so we're going to focus kind of on that a little bit. Um, you want to kind of give us. I'm going to change back to our old format here. Normally we do like book and then person, but I kind of want to get to know you a little bit better right off the shoot. So we'll get more into the personal stuff later, but you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? Like, how did you get into writing?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me and letting me fill this spot. It's a pleasure to be here. So yeah, I have wanted to do writing for about as long as I can remember. And so I started taking it more seriously in high school. But because it was a bit of a big fish in a little pond kind of thing in a small town, I just
Where'd you
kind
grow
of
up?
just outside of Madison in Wisconsin. So yeah, I kind of was a little bit in the burbs there, and I was like, I am God's greatest gift to literature. So I spent a long time just being unteachable because I was like, my teacher said I'm good at this. I don't need to learn from anybody. I know what I'm
Therefore,
doing.
yeah, I am a master.
Right. Yeah, the hubris was alarming. Let's be real. So I had these huge aspirations. I was like, I'm going to be published by 16, and then it was published by 17, and then 18. And it wasn't until 2022. I graduated in 2009, so you guys can do some math on how long that took. But yeah, it took me about 8 years of working on one project before I was finally like, what am I doing? Legitimately, what am I doing with my time? I have sacrificed a lot of time and opportunities trying to get this to work, but obviously, maybe I don't have what it takes. Maybe the like gifted child is not as gifted as she thought, and so I was coming up on my 10-year high school anniversary, and I was like, well, I'm like not married and don't have kids, so like, and I'm not published, so like, what have I done with my time? Because obviously, those are the things that are important. So I was like, I need to just get something out. I need to figure out how to do this or just stop, because what is the point? So I spent the next 3 years after that writing. I had already written Yokni's Eye, but I spent 3 years just kind of learning how to fix it, because I was a lot less emotionally close to that one. So I could kind of Frankenstein it and just really learn what it takes. And then, so that came out in August of 2022. It's beautiful. It is right here. And then I spent the intervening 4 years since then writing all 5 of the books in Chronicles of Castia, and then editing the first one. And now I'm working on book 2. This is the other little baby. Just beautiful. So yeah, that's kind of how we got here.
Well, yeah, let's pivot to the book in question. That's why you're on
Sure.
the show. We're trying to help you promote your latest work, which is Downfall. Can you give us the elevator pitch about what to expect with this, and it is young adult. So
Yes.
I'm actually part of the reason why I was really amped to talk to you, because like I said, we did have a few people submit, and I reached out to you to come onto the show, because we don't really get a lot of young adult authors. And so what can young adults expect from Downfall?
Sure. I mean, yeah, young adults hop on in the boat. It'll be a good time. So, yeah, Downfall is, I call it crystalpunk. So, very much kind of some of that Victorian-ish vibes, but a little bit more, maybe a little bit more gritty in some ways than steampunk. And then their power source is piezoelectricity, which is actually a real form of electricity from crystals and certain ceramics. So if you compress them and oscillate on that, you can get energy, which is what a lot of watches and speakers and things like that use. So I amped that up to a massive scale. You cannot power a city with crystals, unfortunately. But yeah, so it follows Rebecca Dalton, and she is a wannabe engineer in the engineering corps that takes care of these crystals that keep the last city on Earth alive after this apocalyptic event covered the world in snows. And she is sensing these power spikes in the city that are threatening the pillars, and tries to bring it up to the higher ups and ends up getting kidnapped. And so the book kind of centers around her attempts to reach the surface and figure out what is causing these spikes, with the cute grumpy boy that she meets along the way, because it's young adult. You gotta have some of that.
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit. I'm not over the top about it. I promise.
So, I guess, I mean, well, I don't. Man, my urge is to always just start talking craft. I'm trying to remember to help promote the stuff first more. So, all right. So we've got this crystal punk. What would you define as a difference between the crystal punk and steampunk? Is it just the power source and how that works, or is there like an appearance difference between those two styles?
Sure. Yeah. So this was actually a really fun rabbit hole to dive down. So I am a fan of steampunk, but for me personally, which crystal punk is made up. Like, I just said
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Like, and part of it is definitely because the crystals is the power source. So I went on a little bit of a deep dive, and I found out that there's like diesel punk, which is like even grittier than steampunk, and there's gas lamp, which is like steampunk but with magic in it. So there's all of these different little subgenres that come into play. But I think how I tried to apply it here, definitely it has a little bit of the Victorian aesthetic to it. But one of the things that kind of bothers me about steampunk, not always, there are wonderful works of steampunk, is that I don't like how sometimes the steam elements feel like window dressing rather than actually useful. So where I would say this comes into play a lot is you'll see like steampunk costumes, and they're like, oh, I have a top hat and I just glued a bunch of gears on it, or and it's like, okay, but like your hat isn't a machine, like it's not doing anything. And so you'll see certain steampunk stories that kind of just gluing gears onto normal things, and it's not actually functional. Whereas a really good example of what I like about steampunk would be the movie Steam Boy, if you've ever seen that one, where it's really like centrally functional and important to the technology that they're actually using. It's like the MacGuffin is steam powered in a very advanced technological sense. So I think that's a good example. So I wanted the crystals to be very practical and not just window dressing. And there was something else I was going to say about it. Oh, so yes, the other thing I was going to say about it is, so I looked up a lot of what steampunk is, and one of the definitions that I found for it that I really like, which unfortunately I can't remember where the credit is for this, but they were basically saying steampunk is marked by retro-futuristic technology. So it's advanced technologies, but with like retro aesthetics and power sources. So I think that is a really helpful definition to keep in mind, where you get some of the older aesthetics or even like moral codes, like where it's a very clean romance. But the technology is much more advanced, where it's like they have a city that can survive in a blizzardy wasteland for hundreds of years.
And so you pointed out that there was going to be like a vague romance in this, and I do recall from your submission that there are, like, you do have an experience with writing romance. What would be a, I don't know enough about YA to know, like, where's the line between like normal romance and YA romance? Like, what is that, just like infatuation? Like, what level of romance is there in your writing?
Oh, that's very fascinating. Yeah, I mean, I think traditionally the difference has just been the level of how explicit you can be, because they're marketing to younger people, so
yeah.
You don't really want to have like super R-rated stuff. I would say a lot of young adult fiction has gotten a lot spicier in recent years, because a lot of the people that are reading young adult fiction books are like white women in their 30s and they love spice. I am one of those and I don't like spice at all. So I'm like, I got you, people like me who are not a fan of that. I can't handle it like hardly any. So that was one of the things that I try to offer people. But yeah, so they've definitely gotten a lot spicier than they used to be. But
that
I
does
would say
feel
that's
like a bit of an
probably what it is.
encroachment, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think anything spicy really kind of belongs in a young adult setting. Anything that's accessible to kids. But yeah, I've always just been curious as to like how young adult writers approach, like in their mind, like what represents a romance and what is just like a friendship that's got like a hint of flirting or interest between the two people.
Sure.
You know, because it's like, are you writing like the high school? I'm so stupid for what I was about to say. I was going to say the high school equivalent of Twilight, but I was like, that took place. They were in high school. So,
Sure.
but you know what I'm saying? Is it like just like oh, you are cool and I kind of like you, or is it like, hey, let's go on a date, or is it just two people that kind of move in the same direction and kind of mildly like each other? So I was just curious about that. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm just rambling.
No, that's okay. No, it's fine. I think that's a really valid question, because I think there is a really broad range in young adult fiction where you can have really shallow, campy stuff, and you can have stuff that, you know, they're like, oh, they're fated to be together forever, or, you know, it's a big range. I think for me, my answer to that would mostly be it depends on the characters, right? So there's a little bit of a love triangle in this one, with Rebecca and Jakes, who are the main two characters, and then Jake's best friend Ren, uh, minor spoiler, but it's so tropey, it's not really that big of a spoiler.
Yeah.
She's like in love with him, right? So you have a very different dynamic between, childhood best friends and that like desperate yearning where for Ren, like Ruben is it, right? There is nobody else for her. And Rebecca and Jake's, I might have called him Ruben. Jake's, their dynamic is much more like the kind of it's not enemies to lovers at all because they're not really enemies, but there is kind of that tension where they're coming from very different social classes, and there's a lot where they kind of have to work out like changing emotions about somebody based on their initial perceptions, and he's a little bit more closed off, whereas she's pretty open with stuff. But I don't know. I don't have a ton of experience with it, so.
So like they're essentially just kind of like rubbing each other the wrong way as opposed to being like adamantly against each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think he has a lot of prejudices against the upper class people just because of the life that he's lived. But she is, and this actually is kind of a theme that runs through my books, I would think, is, she is upper class, but she's also very like sincere, and she genuinely does care. And so he kind of has to figure out like she's genuinely trying to be a good person. She just doesn't really realize the water that she's been swimming in for a really long time. So sometimes she's just like really, she'll say things that are like bossy or rude because she's used to being able to like order people around, and she's like, well, obviously you should be respectful to me, like not because you're beneath me, but just like because you should be nice to people. And he's like, I have literally no reason to be nice to you because you're from the people that suck. Why would I be nice to you? Yeah. So it's more just negotiating that kind of thing. They're certainly not like there's no blood feud between them or anything like that.
Not that we know of.
Not yet. There's 4 more books.
Yeah, plenty of books left.
Yeah.
So before we get too far into it, because I do feel I got away from the promotional aspect of it, I know. So we're set in a world that's like steampunk adjacent, maybe a little bit more futuristic than steampunk. At least that's the idea I get when I think crystals and energy and stuff like that, versus steam powered. But what kind of world, like what's the dynamic of the world we're stepping into? Is there politics? Like you've already mentioned some class structure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, Castia is the last remaining city on Earth. So this came about from basically scientific rivalries that really got out of hand. And some of the inspiration from that is actually from something called the Bone Wars, which was 2 paleontologists in America that just like really got out of hand with just like the level of sabotage that they got into near the end of just like filling in other people's pits and like sniping staff from the other, and very silly. But I liked this idea of like scientific rivalry getting out of hand. So Castia, as a result, is now the last remaining city, and it's split into 3 tiers. So there's the uppers, the Twilight, which is basically just a band of like 3 floors that separates the top from the bottom, and then the Bones is where like the manual labor is done. So the uppers would be more like white collar and scientific elites that were going to, that promised, utopia, and then things naturally went downhill from there, like they do. So yeah, there's a certain amount of politics between it's more like vertically distributed as far as power, and classes are very much virtually distributed. There's 5 different gangs in the Bones that kind of rule the roost in place of like a more legitimate governmental form. And then the upstairs has both the ruling council, who does kind of the day-to-day stuff, and then upstairs, even higher than that, are the descendants of the founding families that started the city.
Oh, wow. It sounds like you got a lot going on between the layers there. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That sounds fun. That's fun.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Um, what is our? I don't know how much you can give into regards to this, but like, what's our main antagonist of the first book, and like, or you know, what
Yeah.
you can provide of it?
Yeah. So, the main antagonist that Rebecca is facing is basically the people that kidnapped her, and so it's really unclear to her for a large portion of the story who is behind that. So I don't want to give that away because that's important stuff. But she does, in the midst of that, she does encounter the different gang members who are involved in kidnapping her. There's some corruption in certain like military groups that she encounters. Certainly, I mean, Jake's is like Jake certainly would like to be the antagonist for her sometimes, but yeah, it's um there's not an overt big bad for a lot of this initial book.
Okay, it's just a lot of kind of setting the stage, so to speak.
Yeah, there's a lot of I mean, there is a big bad, but they're kind of behind the curtain for a lot of it. So
Yeah. Clearly, there's tension and conflict. I just meant like we're not gonna have any weird resolutions right off the gate because you're trying to set things up for a bigger conclusion. In regards, I feel like we're just gonna go into a more general discussion. What is your what's your draw to writing young adult versus adult?
sure, yeah, I would be thrilled to answer this question. Yeah, I think for me, there's a few dynamics going on for me with young adult. The first one of well, okay. The first one that I will discuss is that I think for me, a lot of it is like a content level thing where I hate bedroom scenes. I hate them. And so it kind of has kept me reading like more young adult and middle grade stuff as I have lived on this planet. Which obviously it's not like every adult book has that, but it's just easier. It's more reliable that it's not going to come up when it's written for children. Um, so that's part of it that just kind of has kept me in this zone. I think another aspect that is important to me is that I think middle grade and young adult books are great. Middle grade books are great because they allow a lot more like whimsy and fun and adventure it's just fun. And it doesn't mean that it's not dangerous or that there's not stakes in it. Certainly, like one of the most metal things I ever read in a book was like in a middle grade book. So Yokni is actually a bit of a crossover novel from middle grade to young adult because I feel like there isn't really a good it's like yay fun adventures and then it's like gloomy angsty teens that can't keep their hands off each other and I'm like
Where's the middle ground? Yeah.
when you're like 14 what do you do? And so I kind of wrote Yokni for that, although it tends to scale a little bit younger, which was a surprise. But I think middle grade has that kind of whimsy and fun to it, and then young adult is where people are really starting to branch off from like this is what I was raised believing versus this is what I believe, and like they start asking questions and questioning the world around them in ways that will be really foundational to how they are when they're older. And I think when you're writing adult characters, you just start to stiffen up a little bit in not in like a rigid, unchangeable, icky way, but like a sapling is very different than an oak tree, right? And so adults are much more set in their ways, in their beliefs, whereas I think young adults have this immense capacity to ask really deep, important questions and go through like massive spans of like metamorphosis in a very condensed time period where they can have those like foundational life changes. And I think I'm really drawn to that because a lot of my writing is very idealistic in wanting to create a world that is changed for the better. And so when I can write people encountering things like injustice or inequality between these classes or whatever and be confronted with the world they actually live in and be like this is a little messed up like
Yeah.
and am I going to go with this or am I going to change, which then leads me into kind of the third draw for me, is that I think, honestly, I think there's a lot of really just awful messaging in young adult books, and that is like actively harmful for kids to be reading. And some of that I think certainly is having too much spice when they're just too young. And my understanding is that like teenagers are like, I don't want this. Like I've got a lot of things that I'm dealing with. I don't need like this on top of that. So certainly there is a degree to which I wish there was more cleaner or sweeter romances or whatever you want to call that for young adults. But I also think there's a lot of messaging in it that is just as it's not designed to screw them up. I think a lot of it is done with like very good intentions to try and help people, but I think the messaging is just wrong. And the two examples that I go to in this are so the first one, which was actually one of the reasons I wrote Yokni's Eye, is I think there's a lot of messaging that's like, if people disagree with you, just wipe them out. Like the way to solve problems is just destroy the other side. And like I get it, like Star Wars, certainly, like you gotta stop Vader, you gotta
Yeah.
stop the Empire. Like I get that, but I also think there's something to be said for like you can't just wipe out everybody that disagrees with you. And it's usually packaged in this like very like adults are evil or corrupt and only teenagers inherently understand what is morally correct for no reason. Like they'll be raised in the most corrupt, awful society, but then they just somehow know without anybody like encountering them to change that attitude. They just know like what is right and wrong, and that drives me up the wall. I'm like, you would not just know that if you weren't,
wouldn't.
if you didn't have someone tell you that. So there's a lot of this like adults are evil and untrustworthy and should never be like they should be rebelled against at all costs. And certainly there are adults that you should resist and like not go along with their behavior. But I think it can create a really negative dynamic that is like ultimately harmful to society or just people that like disagree with you. To be very like, well, anyone who disagrees with me is like an evil person, and therefore it's okay for me to hurt them or kill them. Or like, it's not like I think young adult authors are like encouraging people to go kill people, but I think there is this attitude of like, people that disagree with me are evil, and therefore it is my right or like service to wipe them out, which I think is really harmful.
Well,
And then the other one, oh,
it's
go ahead.
interesting. Not to cut you off. It's interesting that you mentioned like the whole idea of like kids not being like the moral center of the story because they're kids and they're surrounded by a world of corruption and they're likely to be fed into that. It reminds me of like in Harry Potter. Like I never bought Draco Malfoy as a real character until they introduced his dad. Because at first he just feels like a blanket, rude, snobby kid.
Yeah.
But when you meet his dad, it's like, oh, he's that way because he thinks that's like his right to be that way because that's how his dad is. And it's just it made more depth to the character. So I'm kind of in the pocket with you there that like the world, some kids can break from the rule. They can be the exception, but you should have like some kind of explanation as to why they're the exception. But I think it's perfectly fine to have kids in your young adult story that just don't, for lack of a better term, like just know what they're doing. Like they're no better off than anybody else. In some cases,
I didn't know what I was doing then.
Yeah, no kid does.
Nobody does.
In fact, the more kids that think they do know what they are doing, probably a good sign that none of them know anything.
The confidence is so high though when you're that age. It's so high.
It really is, man. I'm 12 years old. I know everything there is in life. There's nothing that can surprise me.
Which is great to have in a book character, but but then it's frustrating when it's like, oh, they actually do.
Yeah.
And it's like, come on.
You had me, and then you broke my suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
You were listening the things that you kind of had an issue with is to like what a lot of young adult writers do I guess that would kind of be a good position to speak. Like I have this question. It's called the truth time question.
Okay.
It's the same question for everybody. I just ask that you be as honest about it as possible and try not to shirk from it. I'm gonna broaden it up since we kind of already discussed like what you were disliking about young adult fiction. My question is, what do you hate about modern fiction? Period.
Ooh. Ooh. I'm not shying away. I'm just thinking
You take your
because
time.
I have a lot of thoughts probably. I guess I think the first thing that comes to mind is I think we've really lost the plots on like what goodness actually looks like. And I think I see this in a lot of where I see this in young adult fiction, which I honestly like at this point, there's not a lot of new media that I consume. I do tend to read like aughts and earlier stuff or like modern middle grade stuff because I just really struggle with this is I think I see a lot of behaviors that are touted as like good behaviors that I think are really harmful. And one of the big hopefully I say hopefully less contentious, but I realize as I say that it's probably exceptionally contentious for a lot of people is I think there's a lot of like putting yourself first, which can be packaged in like either self-care or this like self-defensiveness. So I'll see a lot of this of like you've got to protect your peace and you've got to like take care of you first and like protect like your group and your little tribe that you have. So that's like kind of the other example I see a lot in young adult fiction is this idea of like anyone who asks you to change is your enemy, right? So you'll have this idea that like people who don't accept you exactly as you are without ever asking you to improve or change are your real family, and anyone that would challenge you in any meaningful way to improve yourself or like be less selfish or whatever is like a hater, or they're like not accepting your true self or whatever. And it's like, no, the people that like genuinely care about you and love you will have the guts and love and affection for you to call you out on your garbage so that you can become a better person. And so I think there's a lot that I see in modern fiction that's very like and I think I see this especially with like female protagonists of just like, you know, I'm like a boss girl, so I don't have to like help people or like how dare like this is like not a real example I've come across, but the vibe is similar where it would be like how dare you like ask me the hero to like defend the kingdom. like like what an imposition for me to use my gifts and abilities for your sake or sacrifice myself, whether that's my time or emotional energy or affection to help other people is seen as this like despicable thing because you should always be putting your it's like don't interrupt like my me time. like so I think I see a lot of that attitude that has been like a real shift. You know, if you look at thing like older fiction like Lord of the Rings where you know it's a lot of like I need to be willing to die to protect people that are weaker than me because they can't help themselves. And I think more so I see attitudes now that would be like, what a bunch of weaklings, how despicable, like I need to take care of me. And I have seen examples in like recent modern fiction where it's like people will have I saw one where a female character had an opportunity to help another character that like was in desperate need under like severe oppression and abuse, and she ended up like taking the lady's money and like leaving her instead, and then got so mad at other people for like causing this problem that she literally threw up. And I was like, ma'am, just take her with you. Like you literally could have freed this woman from like a form of slavery and you took her money and left and blamed other people and got so mad you threw up. She literally threw up, and I was like, you could have fixed that. And so I would love to see in more modern fiction like a return to like what actual goodness is, which is often like sacrificial and finding like joy and value in giving of oneself and losing something for someone else's gain. So I would love to see more of that.
Wow, this is why I love that question so much. I love it for the people that answer it anyway.
I'll hop on that soapbox any day.
Yeah, the reason why I love it is because I never even considered that. Like, I observe it, I see it. I also have that similar complaint. But if you asked me that question, that would not have been on my top 10 of things to complain about. And it's very true. There seems to be like a shift in our building of heroes, I think is a good way to describe it. It's just like there's more selfishness than sacrifice. I mean, one great character is like Peter Parker. Probably the character of the hero of all heroes is just this kid that's just, mantling this immense power that he has. And everything in his life just turns to crap. If it's not one thing, it's another, and he like endures that so that he can continue to be Spider-Man. And there's always conversations of like, well, he could make his life easier, and it's like, well, yeah, he could, but it also would put other people at risk, and so therefore that's his justification for not making it easier on himself.
Yeah.
And that is the burden of a hero, of like that silent struggle sometimes. Not that everything needs to be that way, but yeah, I think you made a very good point. I do think there seems to be like this. There seems to be like this appeasement to this attitude of poor behavior.
Mm-hmm.
I think Sean and I have an AOT where we're talking about this, where like it is basically like bad heroes or good heroes, and like we were talking about how Captain Marvel was portrayed in the first film. Where it's like she's doing things that we would on the outside view as like, this is stuff a bad guy does. Like a dude on a bike said something and then she like beat him up, and it's like he didn't even, what he said wasn't even that bad. I've certainly seen people like insult the Terminator, and he's like a robot machine and not the hero, and he destroys them. And that's like, I get that, but it's like, Superman's not gonna take an insult and then punch someone in the face. He's just gonna like, yeah, all right. So yeah, there does seem to be this weird building up of bad behavior, and then like being like, that's our hero. A lot of things you've said today, I feel like you and I agree a lot on.
Great.
Yeah, not that this show's meant to be contentious or anything. It's just it's been a while since I've heard someone make those statements. Just to the degree of what you were talking about with like YA and it feeling more adventurous and like adult stuff. If I had to put it in my own words, I would say it'd be like more adult stuff seems to be more serious. Like you can't have fun, like you said, like the little adventure. But YA, I think they do have a new classification for it. It's like neo adult or something.
Oh, sure, new adult.
Yeah, where it's that bridging gap between your classic YA and then something that's not completely adult. Like, I think, have you ever read Redwall?
Oh, love Redwall.
Yeah,
it's one of the books that made me want to be a writer.
I think that would be considered probably more new adult than the young adult.
Really? You think so?
Well, it's quite violent.
Well, it is quite violent, but it's like, it's also like a middle grade book. Like, you find it in the store in the middle grade section.
Yeah, but I think in today's classification, they would probably move it from that. It's very violent.
I don't know, man. I'm gonna stake my claim that it's middle grade. I don't know. I think kids are tougher than we give them credit for. Like I think like when I was young, I loved those books, and like yeah, they were violent, but that like didn't really bother me. But I mean I also have like I have a pretty high tolerance for that. But I got in trouble with writing sometimes for school assignments. They're like, this girl needs to chill.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, but like I think to your point, like Redwall is like it does have a lot of violence in it, but it's also rich in goodness and contentment. And like it is that classic example where they're like, I will absolutely die to protect these tiny hedgehogs that just want to steal strawberry cordial from like the basement. So it's got that sacrificial side, which is fantastic from older literature. But I think I would still I'm drawing my line in the sand on that one. We can agree on everything else. But like that one I will draw the line in the sand. I would absolutely have a middle grader read that any day. Any day.
Well, I do think it is worth reading. Yeah,
Totally.
I think the reason why I view it that way is because I don't see it like movie ratings.
Sure.
I'm not saying it's like rated M or R and kids can't read it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying like I feel like it's something that falls in that category that is worthy of a kid's attention, but also worthy of an adult's. And
100%.
there's enough content in there to make you feel like you're not reading, the next installment of Akhenaten's book fair stuff. So
Sure.
as an adult, you do feel like you're reading something of literary worth.
Yeah.
And
Let
then-
me ask you a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna reverse question you.
Okay.
Do you feel that most middle grade and young adult stuff is like unworthy of adults to read?
No, of course not. And that's coming from me. I'm a giant nerd. Still kind of ingest some of that stuff. I would say that it's more of a marketing label than anything. And so it's like if you're reading something young adult, it's not to be like this is for young adults only. Kids should not read it. Like kids younger than what we would call young adults. I would say it's
Sure.
more of like it's meant to be there as a guiding principle of like this is what might be in here, content wise. This is what you can expect from this. Is in the same vein. Like I mean, I was a kid reading adult books.
Right.
Like there's nothing wrong with a kid reading something that's written for adults, particularly if the content isn't anything super explicit. It's just like heavily political drama or something.
Sure. Yeah.
But do I think that there's a lot of stuff in the middle grade and young adult area that is appealing to a lot of the adult audience out there? I would say probably not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like the way that I've understood specifically like middle grade through or even younger like children's through new adult is that it tends to be, as far as I understand, which I don't do traditional publishing, it feels to me that it's based on the age of the protagonist is what I was told, which is really interesting because that is not at all how I would do it. So they were like, oh, like if you have like 10 to 14 aged people, that's gonna be like middle grade, and then like 15 to 18 is young adult, and then like college age protagonists would be new adult, which is why I think new adult a lot has been associated with more sexual content, because that's where people are allowed to write more sexual content, and they're like, oh, you're in college, you're figuring out what you like, or what, whatever. So it's really interesting to have that because I tend to be, first of all, like C.S. Lewis knows what he's talking about, and he's like, kids' books that can't be enjoyed by adults are not very good books. Like, so like I think you should absolutely, and there are like I mentioned, like some of the most metal stuff I've ever read is like in a middle grade book where it's like, oh, this is like immortal John Smith, and he wields like Dracula's skull that's been encased in metal as a weapon, and it's like in a book for like 12-year-olds, and I'm like, this is awesome, I love this. So I think it's a really interesting thing to think about, of like what it is by traditional publishing standards versus what like maybe is appropriate. Because I would love to write young adult stuff that features like adult protagonists and be like, yeah, because I'm writing it at a level that like teenagers would maybe enjoy. But I don't know. I haven't been brave enough to do that yet, but
Well,
it's on my list.
yeah, Sean and I have been trying to angle for a while to get a like a publisher or a literary agent on just so we could like discuss these things because I would like to. I mean, you can always Google stuff, but I'd like to hear it from the horse's mouth of the person that's like
Yeah.
in that sphere of like what something should or should not be labeled as, and see like where their guiding principle is. Because for me, saying something as simple as like, well, your protagonist is what really kind of dictates where you fall, and it's like that
Feels weird.
is misappropriating. It's like that could go so many bad ways
Feels really weird.
because there's a lot of stories that could have a child protagonist that can get exceedingly dark and
Mm-hmm.
should not be viewed by children because
Yeah.
it's not meant to be absorbed through
Mm-hmm.
them. But also, like, I'm a big fan. I think I'm kind of in the middle there because I grew up on like the Dresden Files. Like I grew up
Sure.
watching and reading that, and I love that concept. And to me, that was within the wheelhouse of young adult. Um, I guess you could say I don't want to say it was middle grade. I feel like it was young adult.
It's a little bit more. I know they shelve it in adult because I think there's some like spicier ones in the
Prob-
series. I
yeah,
don't know. I
probably.
haven't read it, but
But to me, like that content is like there's nothing really wrong with that content. It's an adult man. He's going through life and he's doing all this stuff. It's magic and you know, there's nothing
yeah,
wrong with a kid reading that.
yeah.
That I saw anyway. I mean, it's I certainly
I
didn't
haven't
feel
read
like
it.
I
I
needed
just
to
need to
hide
it.
the fact that I was reading it from my parents
Yeah,
or anything.
sure.
Um, but I love that kind of content level where it's like this is an adult. He's doing adult stuff, but he also doesn't take himself super seriously. So there's that fun aspect, you know. And I really love the narrative voice in that. I guess I before we hop off here because I have been chewing your ear for quite a while. Sean's gonna yell at me. He's like, "You need to let the guest talk, Ryan." Um,
Oh no, I love it. It's a good conversation.
I am curious as to like your like how do you feel like you've developed your narrative voice in your stories?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I was just talking with a friend about Brandon Sanderson, so it was interesting to think about like the strengths that I have versus him, and they're very different. If anyone was like, "Oh my gosh, she's like Brandon Sanderson," no, not not the same. um, but I think for me,
Before you get
I
into
think
it,
a-
are you a
okay.
Sanderson fan?
I am slowly being pushed into the Sanderson world. It's not that I dislike him. Nobody come at me. Nobody come at me, please. I think for me, I don't typically read super long books, and it's just there's so much of it that I'm like, even if I like got into it, I would never catch up. So it just feels very like daunting at this point to try to dive into it. So I'm reading Elantris right now and just live texting my friends my reactions. So God bless them for their tolerance. So I've read a few of his things. I think there's a lot of things that he is like really really good at. Where I'm like, okay, this is a masterclass on like creating tension with exposition at the same time. Fantastic, like really good at that. Um, like his plot work is really good. So I'm new. I'm new to Brandon Sanderson. I'm working on it. So no one come at me. uh, but I think so. The things that are different with me, or just unrelated to Brandon Sanderson in general, I think for me, I was influenced a lot by the things that I read growing up, and the things that I care about when I'm reading are certainly genre fusion is something that is like I think is really fun. A lot of that comes from like Cowboy Bebop is probably one of my biggest influences there. And then I really like writing that is beautiful and will like stop you in your tracks and just have you like sit there for a second and be like, that was really beautiful, and not like overly flowery, but I think I want there to be like nice turns of phrase. I don't like when authors try to be too clever, and then in a way that is like in service of themselves and not of the reader. I love a clever writer, but not when they're doing it to show off. So I try to come up with like phrases that feel really like accurate in a way that you're like, I know exactly what she means when she's saying that turn of phrase. And a lot of that I would say comes from things like Garth Nix growing up. Jonathan Stroud I came to later in life, and he's one of my absolute favorites. He's very clever. He's very, very clever in a way that is just so delightful. Cornelia Funk, Inkheart is like the opening of Inkheart is just, you just savor it. Mimus is another book that is just, you savor it. Or at least I did. I know people that just like charge through it. So I think I want books that have that. I think rhythm is really important. So I spend a lot of time like rereading a paragraph or reading it out loud to make sure that the flow is really nice and has a good cadence to it. I think wonder is, or like wonder or affection and love is something that I really want to come through in the book, and not in the sense of like, oh, there's like a romance, or oh, these people love each other, but I mean that in the sense of like, I want the love of an author for their own story to come through. So when I can tell that an author is like super passionate and really cares about the world that they've created and really has like a strong affection for their characters, even if they're like putting them through the worst time of their lives, like the fact, like, I want what's best for my characters, even if it means like you're still gonna die in the end. Like even in those cases, or even if they're like terrible, horrible people, I still want to love them and have affection for them, and I want to love the world that I've created, and I want readers to be able to feel that affection come through and have a world that has goodness in it, in the same way that Redwall and Lord of the Rings have that goodness in it that's worth protecting, because those are the stories that people like to live in. And I think I'm getting that from Lisa Cron, who talks about like people like Hunger Games, but they don't want to live in Pan Am, right? Like that's not. No. But they'll like go back to Lord of the Rings time and time again because they love the Shire and they want to spend time there. And so those are some of the hallmarks, I would say. I like asking questions without like answering them. I don't like being like, and the moral of the story is this. I like to just be more like, here's what they did. Like, what do you think? So those are, I don't know if that's like narrative voice.
I think it lends to it. Yeah, I think like, I mean, just like the way you said, like it kind of, you know how they say like when you're talking to people on the phone you should smile because that can like come through. Yeah, I agree with you. Like your passion and love for the story you're telling can come through your words. You know, the time and dedication you put into editing it and making sure that the characters are coming through correctly and that they're being what you envision, like people pick up on that stuff. So I agree with you in that regard.
I think characters is probably one of the things that I'm better at. Is like characters and dialogue are like, plot is much harder for me. So that's like another rando divergence with me. I think for me, like it's going to be a little bit more cinematic, but it is very strongly character focused. It's got a lot of interiority with it. So because the characters are driving a lot of the story, it's not, you know, a complex political intrigue, you know, spy story where it's all about that, or it's not like a mystery where it's all about finding the clues with, you know, kind of more tropey, you know, here's your different stereotypes you have in like a cozy mystery. It's not like that.
Yeah.
So because it is so much more character focused, I would say they're driving a lot of that. And the voice, I do think it's usually pretty easy to tell from how my writing changes, like who the point of view is. You can tell pretty easily in dialogue. I would say my characters tend to have pretty distinctive voices when they're talking, where if I had just like I wouldn't do this, but if I had like a big chunk that was just dialogue back and forth, I would hope that you would be able to mostly tell who is talking. So yeah, I think I'm building usually around the characters and their journeys and how they're responding emotionally or along their character arc.
I do feel like we're getting a little long in the tooth, so I do want
Yeah.
to thank you 100% for coming on. This was fun. I will openly, invite you back if you write something else and you're ready to promote that. Maybe Sean and I can convince you to come on for an attack on table with us. We do those. Those are kind of like more general discussion things, but why don't I just go ahead and kind of close this out? I want to remind everyone to like, comment, and subscribe. Where can we find the Chronicles of Castia Downfall?
Sure. Yes. So my website, amorrisonbooks.com, has links to everywhere that my books live. Amazon, Ingram Spark, or Barnes & Noble, or whatever. They're on most major platforms in ebook and print. And Yokne's Eyes audiobook just came out a couple weeks ago. Or if you want to order direct through me, which you can do through my website, I do have stickers that come with them or that you can buy. So...
Yeah, and I don't know if this is accurate or not. I have been told that it is more appreciated to go directly to the author for their books instead of doing it, through the other things. Support her as best as you can. Leave some comments if you guys have some questions. Maybe she'll stick around and answer them in the comments. Yeah, I think we'll just call it fade to black right there.